Hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome to you. Thank you very much for joining us in whatever time zone you're joining us from today. Really appreciate your time. We're going to be exploring the 2025 global findings from the AI Company Data Initiative, or AICDI, as we will continue to refer to it. My name is Katie Fowler. I'm the Director of Responsible Business at the Thomson Reuters Foundation, and I'll be hosting today's discussion and chairing the Q&A at the end of the session. So please do submit your comments and questions through the Q&A function throughout the webinar, and we'll ensure that we can get to them at the end of the session. So today we're going to be sharing with you findings from the AI Company Data Initiative by the Thomson Reuters Foundation, and this was developed in close partnership with our friends at UNESCO and the AI ethics team. AICDI is now the world's largest dataset assessing corporate AI adoption, and its framework is firmly grounded in the UNESCO recommendations on the ethics of AI, which of course provides a globally ratified and agreed framework for responsible and trustworthy AI. Our 2025 Global Insights reveal an important gap between AI adoption and AI governance. And that gap is the thread that really runs through everything that you're going to hear today. Companies are moving quickly to embed AI across their operations, products, and services, but governance, oversight, and transparency are simply not keeping pace. The gap has real implications for trust, risk management, investment decisions, and regulatory readiness. But before we dive into the findings, it's worth being clear about who this research is designed for. And there are many stakeholders that benefit from the AI Company Data Initiative. So for companies, the AICDI is a practical tool. It really helps companies to identify governance gaps and benchmark their AI governance maturity against their sector and regional peers. And for investors and other stakeholders, be those researchers, academics, policymakers, the dataset really helps to surface emerging risks, assess governance readiness, and anticipate regulatory in some parts of the world, and reputational headwinds as scrutiny of AI continues to grow. At its core, though, AI is about moving the responsible AI conversation from high-level commitments to evidence of practice, and importantly, emphasizing that this is not just a big tech problem to solve. Every single company adopting AI can help to build an ecosystem of good practice and responsible deployment. And I'm really excited to have two fantastic organizations who've engaged with the AI Company Data Initiative to tell us about their experience of deploying AI throughout their organizations, SAP and Telus, and we'll get to that later in the webinar. But to start with, and I'm just actually going to check with my colleague that she's managed to make it. Yes, Joy. I know you were having technical difficulties joining. Thank you so much for joining on your phone. So Joy, you're going to walk us through the headline findings. Joy Zhang is our Head of Data Insights and Investor Stewardship at the Thomson Reuters Foundation. And Joy leads the analytical work behind the AICDI and is going to guide us through what the data shows, where progress is being made, and where the most significant gaps remain. So handing over to you, Joy.
Thank you, Katie. Just want to check, is everyone hearing me okay? Great.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Awesome. So I will just talk briefly about our methodology. So for our data initiative, we covered nearly 3,000 companies. The data was collected from both publicly available information that includes public disclosure, such as ESG disclosure, the annual financial disclosure, and also like the publicly available cybersecurity, data privacy, all this capability policy. And then we also engage with our companies, our company networks, and then as we introduce them, some of them are very they share their experience about responsible AI. So like taking two part of this data that to our AICDI data set this year. So for our analysis and also like the data gathering process, we also use the AI to empower this process with large language model to parse the information against the AICDI framework to buy and scope. And then we also invited to all the systems to review, validate, and also supplement all the potential information that we are missing from this process. Then, let's have a look of what does the data tell us.
Joy,
So,
I'm just going to stop you. Your audio is not great. Do you want to plug some headphones in and see if we can get you a better mic set up? And we'll just have a pause for a second. Perhaps Rosie, you can take over if you're available to do that, are you?
Absolutely, yes. I can, sorry, Joy, to steal your thunder, but I can just read the information until your audio is ready. I'm sorry, Joy. Um, Lovely. So, what does the data actually tell us? On the one hand, 43.7% of companies report having an AI strategy, but on the other, nearly 9 in 10 do not publicly commit to any named AI governance framework. What this suggests is quite telling. Many strategies appear to be primarily oriented towards accelerating AI adoption rather than setting out robust governance commitments. This gap leaves both companies and workers exposed to significant risks. Among the minority of companies that do adhere to an external framework, the EU AI Act is by far the most commonly cited. It has become something of a gold standard, surprisingly, even for companies operating outside the EU, which speaks to its cross-border reach. More broadly, it suggests that companies are far more likely to adopt a framework when there is a binding legal imperative behind it, a point worth keeping in mind as we consider the governance gaps ahead. We can see that the information, communication, and financial services sectors appear to be ahead on AI governance framework adherence and other AI governance mechanisms. This is because a larger share of their tasks can be automated, making them more likely to scale beyond pilots and integrate AI into core operations. These are also the sectors most exposed and therefore most scrutinized when it comes to AI adoption. Not adhering to a governance framework creates risk when it comes to deploying AI within a business. This finding is in line with the 2025 Thomson Reuters study, which found that organizations with a mature AI framework had better outcomes than those that didn't. Another area where companies do perform relatively well is at the senior leadership level. Around 40% have board or committee level oversight of AI, which matters because it can prevent directors from approving AI initiatives without a clear understanding of the underlying risks. But strong signals at the top do not automatically translate into robust governance in practice. Dig a little deeper, and there is very little public information on the teams, the processes, and the accountability mechanisms that are supposed to turn those high-level commitments into action. Only 31% of companies claim to have a team or resource dedicated to AI governance, and of those, just 11% identified a data protection officer, a role that already straddles AI governance and data protection. An interesting finding is that large cap companies are nearly twice as likely to have an AI strategy. AI uptake is shaped not only by firm size, but by local ecosystem and industry structure, with leadership in larger firms concentrated in North America, technology-intensive sectors. This gap between intention and implementation becomes even more apparent when we look at the workforce. Only 31% of companies report having AI training programs, and of those, just 12% offer structured training with comprehensive organization-wide coverage. In other words, most training initiatives are either non-structured or limited to specific teams rather than integrated across the company. This creates a real risk for workers who may lack the baseline understanding needed to use AI tools safely and responsibly. Workers also remain unaware of how AI may affect their work and are not instructed on how to raise concerns or seek remedy when problems arise. Preparedness is concentrated among large cap firms and in sectors closest to AI development and deployment, such as IT, communications, and finance. Just to check, Joy, shall I keep going? Sorry, everyone. Is that, yeah?
Yeah, it would be great. I
Yeah,
should
yeah.
be doing most of it, but
Yeah,
keep
no,
going.
sorry. Yeah, no, great. Sorry. Yes, perfect. I just, didn't want to steal all your thunder. Much of the risk for workers lies within a lack of training or reskilling. Our research shows that only 8.1% of all companies have training programs with quantified impact metrics. This means that some companies may have training programs, but they lack robust measurement. Our research also found that 14% of companies do not have policies to mitigate negative impacts on workers. Regionally, safeguard disclosure is more common among sampled companies in the UK and the rest of Europe than in Latin America, Africa, and Asia. Even within these companies that have some form of safeguarding policies, the information provided is often too high level to assess their practical effect. Many companies describe bundles of controls without specifying how these measures operate in practice, what risks they address, or how compliance is monitored. But what does this mean? In practice, we see that companies may have broad statements such as a commitment to protect their employees' privacy or protect them from AI bias, but these are too general to enforce or evaluate. Many policies do not specify what actions will be taken, what technologies are covered, or how compliance will be assessed. A good practice is to consult workers on their concerns and engage them in setting specific, measurable, and enforceable safeguards. For example, a clearly defined worker protection policy bans the use of intrusive AI tools in employee monitoring or requires that any algorithmic screening tools undergo an annual bias audit and sets explicit boundaries. Alongside training, another critical but underused tool is the impact assessment. Here, the data is striking. 72% of companies do not report conducting any form of AI impact assessment. While companies frequently reference ethical and environmental principles in their AI strategies, these commitments are rarely linked to measurable practices. Of those that do carry out assessments, 11% conduct environmental impact assessments and 7% conduct human rights impact assessments. Carrying out environmental impact assessments has become particularly important given the heightened attention from policymakers, scholars, and business stakeholders to data centres, water and energy demand, electronic waste, and long-term sustainability. Without these structured assessments, companies risk deploying AI systems that have never been tested for real-world impacts, leaving significant risks undetected in areas such as privacy, bias, discrimination, safety, and human rights. It's also worth noting that impact assessments should work hand in hand with human oversight policies. Assessments identify where risks may arise, while oversight determines who intervenes, when, and with what authority. Across the survey, stronger AI governance practices cluster in large cap firms and in sectors such as IT, communication, and financials. As we've seen in previous slides, in such sectors, there are higher rates of impact assessments, clearer oversight policies, and more developed bias controls. This brings us to what is perhaps the most foundational gap of all, oversight of AI training data. AI models learn from training data, which means the quality and integrity of that data shapes everything the model produces. Yet only 24% of companies with an AI strategy show evidence of policies to evaluate the quality of their training data. Biased, incomplete, or unrepresentative data can reproduce historical inequities and generate discriminatory outcomes, even when systems are designed with no intent to discriminate. With AI embedded in companies' workflow, governance needs to extend beyond privacy policies. Ideally, companies should protect end user rights in practice. However, only 16% of the companies considered in our dataset allow users to request the deletion of their data and stop its processing by AI systems. Without wider uptake of data quality policies, harmful or non-compliant data can propagate silently and undermine accountability throughout the entire AI supply chain. The EU AI Act has forced European companies to implement dataset quality and bias controls. This means that companies in the EU are required to apply data governance practices and use datasets that are relevant, representative, and as error-free as possible. In comparison, companies in North America face a patchwork of enforceable state and local requirements that indirectly pressure training data governance. Ideally, regions should aim to standardize what good practice looks like, especially for documentation and evaluation, which would nudge firms towards stronger data governance practices. And now I'm going to hand back to Joy for the next slide.
No worries. I feel probably it will be better if you can keep going. I think it's just one more slide.
Okay, sorry
Sorry about that.
No, oops. Oh, sorry, everyone. Based on the findings from the data set, investors can incorporate the following AI considerations into their processes. First, integrate risk into valuation by factoring governance gaps, potential fines, and reputational demand into cash flow and cost of capital assumptions. Second, adjust for context by modifying sector and regional risk premiums for industries and jurisdictions with low governance maturity or stringent regulations. And thirdly, work with peers and industry bodies to push for better disclosures and standard setting. Super. That's the summary of the findings. I do encourage everyone to go and have a look at the report. I will put a link in the chat to it. Please do, when you have a second, go and have a look and let us know if you have any questions.
Thanks,
But lovely.
Rosie.
Thanks, Katie.
Thank you so much for stepping in there. I'm so sorry that we had some audio issues. I can also see that there's a comment in the chat asking us to slow down a little bit because there is a lot of information to digest. So apologies for racing through that then. And absolutely, if you have any specific questions that you'd like us to expand upon, please do put your questions into the Q&A and we'll circle back to them at the end of the session once we've heard from our other guest speakers. Before we do move to hear from SAP and Telus, though, I would actually just like to take a moment to quickly acknowledge the enormous amount of work that has gone into developing this data set, specifically Joy Jang, Polly Marsh and Gypsum Jamin from the Data Insights team at Thomson Reuters Foundation, and of course our colleagues at UNESCO as well. It really, it does, bringing together insights from nearly 3,000 companies and translating them into meaningful decision usable intelligence is no small task. So it's a real credit to the team, and I'm really happy that we're able to have this conversation today. But now that we've had an overview of what the data is telling us at a global level, the next part of this session is going to try and bring to life some of that company experience that's so critical. And I'm really pleased to introduce Vikram Nagenda, Director of Corporate Sustainability at SAP. Thank you, Vikram, for joining us today. Really, really pleased to have you here. And you, as well as being a member of the UNESCO Business Council, you're going to be sharing some of SAP's experience in taking part in the AICDI and then more broadly your approach to AI governance and responsible AI deployment across the organisation. So over to you. Thanks again.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Katie and the team for the invitation. Very happy to be here. And of course, congratulations on the milestone. 3,000 companies, as you said, is no joke. I think that shows the breadth of the survey, and that's what got us excited when we spoke about this, I think, June last year in Bangkok. Yeah, maybe let me kick it off with a short introduction. So I'm part of the SAP's corporate sustainability team. I manage the AI ethics governance globally across SAP. And this survey was for us an opportunity to benchmark and see how far we've come in our own efforts. And that's exactly what we got out of the survey. And so perhaps starting with why we chose to participate. So we took part in this inaugural survey because we see growing importance in transparency around how companies govern, deploy, and use AI. And of course, Thomson Reuters Foundation and UNESCO carry big names. And their approach was also quite broad, including both the providers and deployers of AI. And we see that responsible AI is an ecosystem play. Everyone has a role to play, and no one company or one industry can ensure responsible AI. Everyone needs to take part. And the survey provides that a level of standard for everyone to understand what are the expectations from responsible AI and can then benchmark against that. So we welcome that opportunity to engage with a structured disclosure framework and to contribute to an initiative aimed at improving understanding of corporate AI practices. And for us, of course, participation was not about presenting ourselves as having all the answers, but rather engage seriously with an emerging area and understand accountability and disclosures. So the disclosure process was valuable in itself because this was a useful internal exercise for us, helping us to bring together information from different areas in the company. It also encouraged internal reflection on how far we have come with respect to AI governance. Where are still the gaps? Where do we need to still invest to close those gaps? And how clearly can we articulate and document the work that we are doing? And even where the work is already underway, a structured disclosure process helps identify areas that can be further strengthened. So, for us, why detailed disclosure matters. Obviously, AI is becoming increasingly important to business operations and decision making, and stakeholders are asking more questions about oversight, governance, and impacts. So, initiatives like this help move the conversation from high-level principles to operationalization. I think that's what the report concludes, that principles are good, but operationalization is where a lot of gaps exist. And better disclosure supports more informed dialogue between companies and stakeholders and helps create a stronger basis for trust and accountability. From let's say why others should participate. So we would encourage other companies to consider taking part in this year's survey, even if their approach is still evolving. So participation, as I said, is not valuable only as a reporting exercise, but as a practical tool for internal learning, internal reflection, and then putting down programs in place for things that are of higher priority. And of course, more companies that participate, the more useful and meaningful the initiative becomes for everyone involved, especially comparing against a certain benchmark to really see how far away or how close to the benchmark we all are. So with that, yeah, it's a call for action. Encourage everyone in this call and everyone else to take part in this survey and then further develop this. And looking forward for further discussions. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Vikram. It was really, really useful to hear from you. I think one point of clarification that'd be really useful to make to everyone here today is the extent to which this initiative can be treated really differently by the different companies, different size companies, and companies at different phases of their AI adoption. Excuse me, one second. You mentioned using the AICDI as a disclosure framework, and indeed, a lot of companies that are very well developed in their AI adoption might want to look at this framework in that sort of disclosure sense, and actually having that rigorous framework provides that opportunity. But for others who actually just want to use the framework because it is actually just a really useful internal governance tool, companies should know that they are able to use the framework and disclose their information privately to the initiative. Excuse me, where it can be anonymized and aggregated and included in our global findings report, but not necessarily publicly disclosed. So there is that sort of safe space where companies are actually able to engage with this ethical governance framework that we've developed with UNESCO without feeling the fear of public disclosure, which of course sometimes threatens companies to engage in an initiative in this early stage. So I just wanted to clarify that as well. Before I erupt into a full-blown coughing fit, this is a webinar of disasters all round. I am really pleased to introduce Jesslyn Dimond, who is the responsible AI and data innovation leader at Telus, who can also share experience of Telus joining the AI Company Data Initiative. Thank you so much.
For sure. Awesome. Thank you, Katie. Well, for those who don't know TELUS, we are a global technology company based here in Canada with roots as a telecommunications network provider, but we have services now in health and agriculture, really supporting that connection and social good that comes from responsible business practices and responsible data practices. So the team that I'm part of is called the Data and Trust Office. And when we talk about connectivity and network and data services, there is immense trust that is needed to be successful and to really drive out the outcomes that we're looking for and the promise that this technology builds. So with that, my role is leading our AI governance program. And I'm so excited to be here today to celebrate this incredible achievement of launching the AICDI and all of the participation from around the world. Because when we talk about fostering trust in AI and in the technology industry that drives that, we have to be trustworthy and also talk about it so that we can be trusted. So those are very different things, being worthy of trust, but having people understand why they can trust you. And that's where things like this disclosure framework, the transparency that it drives, but also the accountability and respect that is outlined through the framework to help benchmark your programs are crucial. So having that structured set of criteria can be super helpful when looking at this daunting space and this moment of trying to figure out, how do I ensure my organization is using AI responsibly? And we need more good examples of that. And having a framework like this helps us compare apples to apples. Around the world, around different organizations, there is a lot to learn, and having these benchmarks and examples of what good looks like and how it can be implemented in practice is really, really important, and such a benefit of having this framework available. So as I said, there's both the need to be trusted and the work that goes into being trustworthy, which is certainly a maturity framework and a journey. But when we talk about the types of services we're in Canada, our AI minister has said AI moves at the speed of trust. AI moves at the speed of innovation. AI moves at the speed of innovation, but people move at the speed of trust. And a big part of our program for helping us shape what ethical AI looks like is having that conversation with people so that we can understand what their expectations are and what they're looking for and what their concerns are when it comes to this technology. And that's been something we've been researching for the past 3 years. So our most recent study is available on our website, sharing the views of over 11,000 North Americans. And we have learned that the use of AI is happening everywhere, and it's really increased, such that over 85% of Canadians and Americans have used AI in the past year. But only 35% in Canada and 47% say they trust companies that use AI. But here's the good news. Over 70% say they're more willing to trust companies who explain their AI use in understandable terms. And so I think frameworks like this are very important for helping foster that trust and building conversation about where the benchmarks should be. So when you need to fill in some of the blanks about how do I actually do this? How do I put this into practice within my own organization? There's so much we can learn from a philosophical perspective, from a literacy perspective, but having these concrete examples and criteria for what trustworthy AI looks really helps us move forward and have kind of that common benchmark. So I think it's really important for other organizations to go through this exercise. And as Vikram had suggested, it's a very practical tool internally for building that alignment and that kind of vocabulary and that learning about what cross-functionally you are working towards when it comes to AI governance, because we know AI is truly a team sport. But this exercise also can be very helpful for demonstrating accountability. We said that transparency is important, accountability is important, but what does that mean beyond having a set of policies or having a set of principles about what ethical AI, responsible AI, AI governance means. So this tool can help you identify how to put those principles into action and provide that evidence behind the commitments you are making. And as I said, it's a team sport. The more companies that participate, I think will have far more useful and meaningful benchmarks and data to help demonstrate to the public that we know how to use AI well and it can be trusted. So I would really encourage organizations that are considering participating in this important data collection practice to continue to do so, because it is going to help us all understand what good looks like and how we can move forward together. So thank you so much for having me this morning.
Jesslyn, thank you so much. That was super, super useful and insightful. And I love the phrase that it's a team sport in relation to our entire ecosystem, and really to encourage as many organizations in as many different sectors to participate as possible. But also it's a team sport internally, right? I mean, one person alone cannot hope to start governing all of these different aspects that AI is touching in one organization. Can you tell us a little bit about the collaboration that went on internally at TELUS in order to contribute to the survey? I'd love to hear a little bit more how you work sort of across your teams.
Thank you. Of course. Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, I'm part of a team called the Data and Trust Office. And I think what has been super helpful is looking at the processes and policies we already have in place for how we govern our organization's data use, privacy, security, all of that fits into AI. And a lot of the processes around risk identification, risk management, reporting, incident, those can be leveraged and applied to what is certainly unique when it comes to AI, but is fundamentally very, very similar from a governance process perspective. And so that meant that when we looked at how to provide information about our process and participate in this disclosure, we needed to bring the different groups from across our organization together. So that could include our audit team, our security team, our privacy team, our data governance team, and of course, our AI engineers that are building, developing, and using these applications. I think, what was very helpful in that being able to go through this exercise is having some of those forums and touch points already set up, but it is a very interdisciplinary space. And what you will find is that everyone has something to bring, and building that alignment on what needs to happen is a really valuable side effect of going through this process, because you're getting kind of like that common state of what is expected and what we're doing in respect to that across the organization. And I think that can both demonstrate accountability within your external stakeholder group, but also internally. So there is recognition of what needs to happen and how we are shaping that within our teams across the organization.
Thanks, Jesslyn. And Vikram, obviously you both hold very different posts respectively in your organizations. It's interesting to come at it from a corporate sustainability perspective. We know that, or we project that AI will be a really, really important part of what corporate responsibility, environmental, social governance looks like in the future, but it's not yet embedded into compliance issues around ESG very matter-of-factly. So, did you take a different approach to it? It is a rhetorical question, really, because as an initiative, we want to know who's the right person to go to within a public listed company. I'm not even sure there's a right answer yet. Vikram, I'd love to hear from you.
No, I think that's an emerging topic, at the same time a very important topic. So indeed, I think there is a need to overlay an ESG perspective on this entire AI transformation. And I think we've made some progress when it comes to governance aspects. As Jesslyn articulated, it's more or less the same internally at SAP. I think from a social aspect, we've implemented the UNESCO recommendations for ethics of AI. We have a human rights office that is looking at the human rights impacts of AI. I think when it comes to environmental aspects is where I guess the biggest discovery is still necessary because this is more a technical aspect on one side, a strategy on the other, and an execution that is needed, a consistent execution that is needed. And these are the three building blocks. So there is clearly a strategy that is needed while we are busy in transforming the company and the economy with AI. We also need a strategy on how we can make that sustainable for the future generation. So that's a strategy that still needs a lot of work and thinking and um, interventions, I would say, at places where decisions are made. So one, and then of course, from a technical point of view, how do you execute on those strategies? So I think that is still something. A lot of research work is ongoing. We are also doing a lot of research. We are collaborating with universities across the globe, trying to look at benchmarks, evaluations, and so on. But of course, execution and how do you translate all of that information consistently? So when we as a provider of AI, where we provide hundreds of AI capabilities across 100,000 employees, how do we scale that everyone understands the sustainable impacts and applies and thinks about that and makes those decisions? So for sure, this is an important problem, but also a problem that requires systemic thinking and execution. Um, yeah, and absolutely right. So there is no one person that has this hat on. I think as with governance, you need multiple departments coming together, agreeing on a strategy, and then going back and then executing on that strategy. And of course, uh, I mean, one thing that I really like that in the report, this was already addressed, right? So already last year when we filled this out, I think that's kudos to the team that is, putting these questions together. And the other aspect of that report is I think it forces cross-functional thinking. That is exactly what is needed, right? So both from a governance perspective, but also in the ESG perspective, we all evolve as a company, right? So security and data protection has been there for a while now. Ethics is something that was established in the last years. Compliance is now coming up with the EU AI Act. Legal has been a cross-function. So across all of these has different levels of maturity and different processes and different silos. But a report like that forces everyone to come together and say, how do we answer a question that requires three departments to come together to have a cohesive, consistent answer? I think that's been valuable even in the ESG related questions.
Yeah, super interesting. Thank you so much. There are quite a few questions coming in from the audience now. Delighted to see that. Joy, I'm going to come to you and I'm going to present a double header so that you can address two quite quickly. So the first is just whether you found any of the outcomes of the data surprising. And the other is, could you just talk a little bit about what the alignment of AICDI and the survey is with AI regulation across the world?
Sure, I will start to talk about like the regulation one. So when we put together this framework, we also mapped our questions and also like the whole framework with like more than 30 different global AI standards, regulations, and some soft laws. For example, like the EU AI Act for sure, and also some like some other more traditional conventional like technology-related regulations, for example, like the GDPR. We also mapped out, say, like if any alignment with our tech security sector's questions. So that is definitely like very already well mapped. If you're interested to take part of the initiative, we are more than comfortable to share the mapping with you to help you understand by answering this question, like to assess your compliance journey with these different regulations across the world. We also include South Korea, Japan, also China, these different like jurisdictional regulations. Can you remind me what is another question?
It was what was most surprising about the findings?
Yeah. The most surprising one I would say is like we are quite surprised about some positive findings. Like so many board already have the oversight of the AI issues, which is quite surprising because like AI adoption is like it's quite new, even though the technology itself not, but the adoption is like scaling a lot in the past 2 years. So we're glad to say like so many board members they has like put AI oversight under their agenda, which is very encouraging. It's a very, very important first step. However, our finding also point out like the implementation side, like the real daily operational oversight is still lacking. So this is definitely a long way to go for companies to really think about how to enhance their AI governance to make sure like expose less risk about that. And another very surprising finding will be about like EU AI Act. Because based on the companies who cited the EU AI Act as the core framework to align with, half of them are not from EU, which is very interesting to say, like the cross-border effect. Like we assume because like we do have lots of UK plus EU companies, this is why we do assume EU AI Act to be the most popular framework. But we're very, very surprised lots of non-EU companies, Asia companies, US companies, they all cited the EU AI Act. So we think for like the EU, this kind of like they tend to have very comprehensive regulations. Their impact is beyond the legal obligations itself, but is also like works as a North Star for so many companies to think about what they should follow to stay aligned with these key regulations.
Thanks, Joy. That's really interesting. I wanted to respond to another question, which was around whether the AICDI had a standardized way that actually encouraged companies to project or predict future job losses due to AI. And I think this is a super, super relevant and pertinent question, which of course a lot of companies are asking and desperate for some way to support their projections. And the truth is that currently there is no standardized way of projecting that that sort of change. Companies are doing this, at their own discretion. And often actually without a lot of substantive material evidence. But what we are doing is trying to build a data set around that. So we are asking companies to report on the extent to which they have been redeploying or losing workforce as a result of AI. And that's actually not through just our AI Company Data Initiative survey. That's a question that we have been asking for almost 10 years through our Workforce Disclosure Initiative survey, which was the sort of founding corporate transparency disclosure framework from which we built the AI Company Data Initiative. So if you are interested in more workforce related issues around technology, I do encourage you also to look out for the launch of our Workforce Disclosure Initiative report, which will be published at the end of this month. That's wdi.trust.org. There are a couple of other questions which I'd like to address as well. In terms of how investors are receiving the AICDI, anecdotally, very, very positively. We have a really committed, amazing group of investor signatories, I think a couple of whom are actually on this call. So thank you very much for supporting the initiative. Ultimately, it survives and is important because it is investor backed, and the investors are able to propose companies from their portfolio to participate in the initiative, and then indeed invite companies from their portfolio to engage and disclose their information to it. Our investor group are as interested as all of us in, how we can translate a lot of the rhetoric that we've heard around AI into, material investor-ready analysis, and that is a really key ambition for the AI Company Data Initiative, and one that we continue to drive. We'll be hosting the findings of our AI Company Data Initiative exclusively for our investor group over the next couple of weeks, and we'll have some more granular feedback at that point. We're also in collaboration with PRI and their investor network, so we'll be able to share the findings through that network as well, and they will be able to inform the next sort of iterations of the survey and hopefully the growth of the initiative, so that we have more and more companies engaging year on year. Very happy to share the mapping of the AI survey alignment. It's actually included, the regulation mapping is included in the Excel format of the survey, which is available to download from our microsite, but we will share information with all attendees after this session. Vikram, I'm wondering whether you're still on the line, because I think you might be the best person to answer. What are some of the challenges in addressing environmental concerns over AI adoption? Are you able to respond to that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. That's a pertinent question. I think I briefly mentioned that in my last response. So one, there is a lot of excitement around AI. There is a lot of excitement around producing more AI systems, AI capabilities, and the speed of model developments, availability of newer models, more capable models. I think what's happening is the response time is very fast. So in that sense, everyone wants to use the biggest, the latest models. I think one of the challenges is that how do we have sufficient time to benchmark each of these models against their environmental performance, and then taking time to do the model right sizing, right? So that's purely from a technical point of view, right? So meaning, how can we choose the right models for the right workloads, and not always having to choose the latest and the greatest models. So that's one very technical side. But on the broader sense, I think the sustainability, it started off with the notion that AI is against sustainability, right? So meaning because of the high compute and high data center and high electricity needs, this is against sustainability. But in the meanwhile, over the last 1 year, we have had many research that shows that when applied, AI can in fact accelerate towards sustainability targets. So especially on the environmental targets related to carbon emission reductions, water usage, and so on. So as mentioned in my last response, it is now the right point in time to derive those concrete actions that needs to be taken on where to deploy AI for accelerating towards sustainability targets. And when deploying those AI, how can we make sure that it's deployed in the most efficient way, right? So these are the two dimensions of that overall net should improve the environmental performance. So there is a lot of work that needs to be done. I think we are past the rhetoric that AI is versus sustainability, but it's now moving more towards how can we put AI towards achieving sustainability targets.
Thanks, Vikram. That's great. I think there is an anonymous, question about becoming an investor signatory. Any and all of those sorts of questions will be answered immediately if you just drop a very brief line to our email address. I think Rosie's put it in the chat a couple of times. Please feel free to drop us a line and we'll be able to talk to you about becoming an investor signatory, which is completely free to do and does require your public support of the initiative. And there are some benefits to doing that as well, which we can talk you through. We're kind of coming to a wrap up. If there are any other questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. Joy, I wondered if you wanted to have any sort of final words, just given that you were unable to share the findings or respond to any of the remaining questions.
I will just share some like final thoughts about the funding and also like the whole analytical process. So based on our analysis, like we do realize transparency is really, really lacking. So we also want to point out, even though some of the stats may seem a little bit scary, like, like no company is doing this and that to be responsible and ethical. However, we also think it's very likely it's because companies being very humble, they haven't shared enough information with external stakeholders. So we do very optimistically think many companies may already have some action. So we just want to encourage companies to disclose and also to communicate what kind of action they have tried to do publicly and transparently, of course, through AICDI, and then like we can work together to make sure when we accelerate the AI adoption, also think about responsibility carefully.
Thanks, Joy. That's really helpful. And I think we're going to wrap up at this point. So really just a final word from me. A huge thank you to everyone who's engaged really thoughtfully in the conversation. Really pleased to have had so many questions. And just to reiterate that we are absolutely here to answer any of your questions. If you'd like to have a follow-up call about any of the detailed findings that you receive after you download the report, please feel free to drop us a line. But the three key takeaways that I'd love for you to take from this conversation is really that AI adoption is accelerating and governance is just not keeping pace. And there is a real gap that is created for companies and investors and for society. Secondly, transparency is fast becoming a strategic necessity, and we really encourage anyone to start considering how transparency can be a really key tool and lever for building trust. The trust that Jesslyn was also referring to when she spoke is a really, really critical part of engaging all stakeholders. And finally, ultimately, this work is about progress. It's not about perfection. And we really want to acknowledge that. I think it speaks to earlier points about potential fear with engaging with these sorts of disclosure initiatives, the point that Joy made, which is around potential modesty and just the lack of awareness and understanding that there is across a lot of sectors about how competitors and peers are performing. But engaging with the AICDI really gives companies an opportunity to be benchmarked against their sector peers and to really get an understanding of the pace of their AI governance and responsible adoption in comparison to their peers. So I really want to just emphasize how much the AI Company Data Initiative is existing to support learning and benchmarking and improvement, rather than trying to out anyone for a lack of performance. Even our investor group are really cognizant of the fact that they would love for companies to start engaging and showing willingness and showing improvement year on year. I think perfection is really not something that we really even understand what it looks like at this point, let alone drive for it. So helping organizations move from principles to practice and from intention to accountability is a really, really key part of the AI Company Data Initiative. And at the Thomson Reuters Foundation, we're working really closely with UNESCO. We believe that responsible AI is not just a technical issue, it's a leadership and a governance challenge. And we really hope that today's discussions help to move that conversation forward in an evidence-based way. So just one final thank you very, very much to Joy, and of course, Rosie, thank you very much for stepping in during our technical difficulties, to Vikram from SAP and to Jesslyn from Telus. Huge thank you to you both for joining us today and for speaking openly about your journey and your engagement with the AI Company Data Initiative. We really do value your input. And as I mentioned, if you'd like to learn more about the AICDI or access the data or explore how to get involved, please do engage with us. Drop Rosie a line. She's put her email address into the chat function, and we really look forward to continuing the conversation with you. Thanks very much for joining, everyone.